I'm Mel.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Beck. And this is We Are Woman.
Today we wanted to talk about something that feels really important, and that's sisterhood. Because if we're honest, we think most women have experienced both sides of this. The really beautiful moments where another woman has supported you, believed in you, lifted you up. And also the harder side: comparison, competition, feeling judged, or feeling like there isn't enough space for all of us. And when you really think about it, that's kind of strange because when we look at nature, that's not how things tend to work. A forest doesn't grow because one tree wins and the others lose. Everything is connected beneath the surface. The roots are intertwined, sharing nutrients, supporting the ecosystem. And this all made us wonder, what would it look like if women related to each other more like that? Not competing for space, but supporting each other, and not constantly striving or chasing, but also allowing ourselves to receive support, encouragement, and wisdom. So today, we wanted to explore sisterhood, what it really means, why it can sometimes be hard, and what becomes possible when women start lifting each other up instead of feeling like they're competing. So, Beck and Sarah, we go again today with another episode. And where I want to start here is when you hear the word sisterhood, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I think it's such an important conversation because when we were talking about this podcast, we settled on a love letter or love letters to our sisters. And part of the conversation was how do we bring the sisterhood back together? Because our modern world has really pushed us apart. And I think it's an important conversation because sisterhood can sometimes sound really beautiful in theory, like this magical, whimsical thing that we're all part of. But I think in reality, it's actually a little bit more complicated than that. And I think some of the wounds that we carry as women have been wounds created by other women as well. So you're thinking about some of the stuff from our schools, being excluded, feeling betrayed, having comparison. Even my 6 year old, she's 6 and she comes home and she's asking questions about whether her body is as good as
Mm,
another child's body or her
yeah.
ability is as good as another child's ability. So the comparison starts really early. And when I question her on that, it's just little comments that they're saying to each other in the schoolyard as well. So the sisterhood feels like something that is really beautiful, but it does come with some baggage of younger selves, workplaces, and also a level of social threat from other women that we've had to navigate. And it means that sometimes for some of us, and certainly for me, I've gone through periods of my life where I've seen women and female groups as, yeah, a social threat, as danger rather than as safety. So that's been something that I've had to learn from as well. So for us today, I think what's really beautiful is the opportunity to explore this honestly, to go into the sort of messy stuff that has created this separation, this feeling of competition, like we are all competing with one another, and an opportunity to find our way back to what does sisterhood really mean in practice and how can we really start to bring that back. And if you think about it from generations and years gone by, women were sisterhood. We were raising families and kids as a sisterhood, as a tribe. They talk about it now how important your tribe is when you become a
Mm.
parent. And that was the way things were back in the day. People would cook together, or, make meals together, to clean together. And then all of a sudden, over the last few generations, women have had to go into the workplace and they're navigating this place that was, to some extent or to a great extent, not really part of a woman's experience. And even now, there are still moments where we're fighting for equality. When I work in organizations, often I'm working in C-suites. There's one seat at the table, or maybe two, for women. Generally, that's HR or people and culture. So there's still this sort of relatively new experience of moving away from that and coming back into this space of, oh, okay, we're all fighting for these new opportunities, but the opportunities are still quite so new in some areas of our lives. And that means it feels like there's less of them for us as well. So, yeah, I think there's a few pieces at play here worth exploring for us today around sisterhood. And I know from my own experience, I've experienced workplace bullying twice in my life, both
Mm.
from female leaders, both related to competition and threat. At
Mm.
least in the first instance, I was someone that was friends with everyone, that knew everyone, that had a lot of social cred. And that, I feel, was a contributing factor to the reason why I'd experienced bullying from this particular person as well. So it is very common that we currently are in this space where we might see each other as a threat. And now there's an opportunity for us too, I think, as the world seems to be doing its weird thing at the moment where everything feels like it's crumbling, to move into this more collaborative place.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Beck. There's a lot that is sort of like floating through my sphere as you
Mm.
start sharing, because there's so many different pieces there. But yeah, what comes up for me as we unpack this topic is indeed like we went from really living more in tribes, and in maybe in some way what we can say with that more tribal living, we were more honoring, maybe in both males and females, are more biological, I suppose,
Mm.
ways of being and roles. And that has changed mainly with when the industrial revolution came, right? So when the industrial revolution came, we started to move into optimization and into, factories and production and procedures, and that is really like standardization, so following systems and operations and productions. And I think that is
Mm.
quite a it's been a very beautiful revolution in many ways, because it's allowed for obviously a big revolution in lots of areas, in terms of wealth and in terms of, yeah, also female education and things like that. And also it comes with a lot of sort of qualities that are required to operate in those kind of spaces. And what I mean by that is like qualities like maybe more things like discipline and consistency and efficiency and time management, because time is money, right? And that wasn't there before. Like if you really think about it, in before the industrial revolution, or maybe even before that, when we were really living in tribes, it was more of a, we actually needed the tribe to survive. We
Mm.
needed to try, I needed
Mm.
to have a good relationship. If I was, let's say, a woman in that tribe, I needed to have a good relationship with all the aunties and the grandmas and the grandpas and the warriors and all the children in the tribe for me to actually thrive in the tribe. That it was required. Whilst I think what has the industrial revolution brought about, and now where we're at now with that, is like we almost don't need tribe in order to survive. And I think there's somewhat of a mistake in that. And not fully, of course, we still need tribe to some extent, but essentially, if you have a good paying job and you make money, you don't need anyone per se to survive. And so I think the survival system in some way went from a more social system into a production system. So from a more social orientation to like how much can I produce, and in that I can survive. So I think what that has done to males and females is that there's a lot of focus on productivity and production, because that is literally our way of surviving now. And then of course in the last few years, the last I would say 2 generations, there's been way more women in the workforce, and that has even increased. That sort of production is survival. And I do, like, if I look at biology of a woman, there's so much beauty to that. And I do really want to emphasize that, because it means that women essentially can be in the exact same roles and jobs as many men, right? And what we're starting to see now is that a lot of women are starting to outperform men, which brings actually a whole lot of other issues with it. But maybe we can go into that another time. But I do think on some level it goes against our biology, and it's not. I don't think it's black and white, right? Let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. But I think what a lot of women are also finding now is like, where is this sort of maybe the healthy integration? As I think is what we're kind of looking for, where we can indeed do things in the world, be productive, be creative, put our passion projects out there, be on some level provider to our family, and also in that way have a lot more freedom and choice, which is so important, right? And also, how can we really start integrating back into our lives more of these qualities of actually depending upon other sisters and other women to raise our children in some ways, or to support each other, right? And to have more of those community units that also support each other. So I think what we're seeing, indeed, back like to your point, I think we swaying from one more extreme end of the pendulum to another more extreme end of the pendulum. And I think what a lot of women, at least that I have conversations with now, what really a lot of them starting to crave is a bit more of a middle ground, where they still want to put out their passion projects and their things in the world and be independent in those ways, which is important, right? And also actually have a bit more dependency in a healthy way as well on our community and on each other. And like, I mean, the amount of times that it comes up for me now to just asking for a favor feels like asking too much. And it's like, what? Like, what's going on there? Like, since when was asking for a favor almost a bit shameful? Because there's not directly time, money sort of maybe given back in some way or some other favor. And so I think what this industrial revolution has done to our systems, it's quite tit for tat. It's quite like, I do this for you and you do this for me kind of thing. And I think what that doesn't allow for is more of a natural flow of giving and receiving in more of a flat structured way, I guess, where there's still opportunity for people to do their own creative projects and things, but also where there's a bit more of that, I guess, flat distribution of energy. That's sort of the way I visualize that. So it's an interesting conversation regarding where I guess did we really lose that sense of a deeper sisterhood. And I believe it really comes down to a lot of the structures that have been put into place. And Beck, what you were pointing to around like school children, like that your daughter of 6 is coming home and is already comparing in that way. And I believe it for a big degree, it's also because the structure she's placed in is a competitive environment. Like fundamentally, it's kind of like who has the highest grades and therefore who can get the best job, and therefore who, like I don't think it's the humans. I actually think it's the structure that creates that mindset in ourselves. And then we carry that forward into other areas as well, of course, in workplaces and things like that. So I mean, I don't know exactly what the solution or what the flow on from that is, but I think when we can actually start to at least see that more clearly, that it's actually, I think, the systems and the structures that we have in place, that we can find a deeper clarity in how can we actually return back to more of that sisterhood and or have more of a healthy integration, I guess, of more of a masculine and feminine way of operating in the world.
Yeah, there's so much in this conversation. And I think what's coming up for me and listening to you, Sarah, as you were sharing, I think a really useful question would be, Like, be honest. How much can you genuinely rely on other women? Can you trust other women, and can you receive from other women? Because it appears that, the sisterhood, it isn't difficult because essentially where females are inherently competitive. It's the wounding and it's the conditioning. And then can we from there start to see that and go into a space of receiving and, yeah, just participating in the sisterhood, but from a place of also support and receiving. And I think that's a really vulnerable place for many women, based on all our experiences that we've had through these things, through the scarcity, through the limited roles, therefore the competing, therefore into whether or not we can trust other women, then our conditioning and our wounds. There's so much in that. And can you actually get to a place where you can rely on other women? That's a huge question, and it feels really deep for me too, actually.
It's so interesting you say that because I think women were never meant to do life alone, as we've said, and as Sarah said so eloquently. I think the sisterhood was once part of how we survived. But now, because we've been in this system over the last few generations, it's like every time something comes up with a woman, our go-to is that compare and contrast. And I'll share an example from our very beautiful friend Alex, who I've said this to her, so I'm sure she won't mind me sharing this. But when we were about to start studying, and I hadn't met anyone yet, but I was in this WhatsApp group with everyone. And I was looking at everyone's photos and I saw Alex's photo and I was thinking, wow, she is so beautiful. I felt so intimidated by her just from the photo of her. And then I ended up sharing a house with Mel and Alex and a few other people for that first week. And I was just blown away by the fact that this person was not just beautiful, but wow, she was so lovely as well and kind and inviting. And I found that scary to an extent because I wasn't used to that. Like, wow, these people are so lovely and so kind and so inviting is so different to what I had experienced of just sort of being an adult working in big corporate organizations, sort of having moved around a lot and not, not living in a place with my younger friends and having to start again. It was so unusual, but my reaction to it was also a little bit funny for me to sort of sit in that and think, why, why, why do I find that even more scary that these people are so lovely in the first instance? So I think that we can sometimes assume that women are all out to hurt each other to climb to the top, but I don't think that's the case. And I think those beautiful moments can remind us that sometimes we're not doing that. We're just in this space where sometimes we don't feel like there's enough space for all of us. And so it's a survival mechanism.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you for speaking to that back. And that example is quite funny, particularly knowing Alex as well. It's like just placing that into that context. And yeah, what comes up as you share that actually is kind of like, it sounds like we might, as women, have different types of conditioning of what makes us valuable. And also I'll share my experience of that, which was, again, I'll share my experience of the modeling industry because that's just my story. But yeah, like my value and everyone else's value in the industry was how do you look? Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. Like, what are your looks and how sellable are your looks and how, in some way, how beautiful are you? Yeah.
Mm.
And yeah, there's a little bit of personality in there and a little bit of sass, but mostly it comes down to looks. So for a very long time, I'm still doing this in my lenses and in my filters, is like beauty equals threat. Like on a very sort of basic, simple level. So kind of to your point back, like you saw Alex's photo, you're like, wow, she's so beautiful. And immediately sort of this, I guess, threat response comes up is kind of what I'm hearing, right? On a very sort of unconscious maybe level. And then we go into the conscious and I'm like, oh, why is that a threat? But like for me, it was around beauty. And I think that is pretty common because a lot of women's value is placed into beauty, like just from a lot of our conditioning through movies, through media, through consumerism. It's a lot around beauty, yeah, and youth and how do you look, and that is your value, right? But some women have obviously placed their value maybe in how smart they are or how capable they are in other areas of life or how much money they earn or how well they can raise children. I mean, God, like you can place your beauty or your value into anything. And what's interesting is like maybe in that industry, the comparison was around beauty for me. And so every time I see a beautiful a woman, I have this subtle response in my body. It's unconscious. It's not me choosing to have that. It's just a response that happens so quickly of, yeah, like there's some sort of a competition here. And I have been working on that piece a lot, and I still will be working on that piece because I really want to come into a super beautiful, clean frame around that where, yeah, I can see and acknowledge someone's beauty, which is a true asset of value also. Like there is truth to that as well, right? And then also, yeah, coming to that point of like, it doesn't take away from anything in me and or in anyone else for that matter, in that might be in the space. And then also what I've seen is like women that just become mothers and then they start to compare themselves to other mothers, right? So it also seems to be like whatever we're kind of building, I guess, or whatever we're valuing in our own personal lives is what we naturally start to compare with other people and other women around us. And I want to speak into also the health of that, because I think there's a healthy element in that, which is that we compare because we sense where are we in our social environment. Like I think there's a healthy sense of comparing, and because it's like a discernment radar, it's a moral radar as well. It's like, oh, like if I see someone, let's say, treating their child in a really beautiful, good way, I'm like, wow, that's inspiring, right? Like, and there's that you can say there's a comparison element in that, but I'm also using it as a way to see, wow, that like what are ways to do things in a what I would call a morally good way, you know? And I think we want to maybe discern of like where are the borders between simply seeing value in others, in other women as truth, and like, yeah, there is truth to a beautiful woman being like, that's a part of her being and therefore part of her value as a human in this life. There's truth to that. It's not that that's not true, right? But to what degree does it become maybe more toxic, I guess we can ask, or it becomes a bit overly important, you can say, or yeah, to the point where we start to see it as a threat as opposed to as more of a quality of that's simply there. And I guess the same can go for any other qualities that we might have, whether that's our ability to speak and facilitate, our ability to read the room, our ability to, yeah, respond to our children in particular ways, our athletic abilities, like all of these qualities do make us also in some way who we are, right? But how do we celebrate it in a way where we can, I guess, see it through a lens of love and opportunity, I guess, as opposed to more of a threat or competition? I think that's kind of what we're bordering on. Like that's like, what's the difference and how do we recognize that within ourselves? And how can we work with these energies in a way that is uplifting of ourselves and each other? Because yeah, I use other women also as inspiration. I'm like, wow, that she's doing that so well. Like, fuck yeah, I want to live up to that standard. And it's also nice to have standards for myself, you know? So there's a really healthy component to that as well. And I guess what we're discerning is, where does it become not so healthy? Where does it become what's the word? Self-deprecating, I guess. Or where do we put ourselves down? Yeah. And, or where do we put ourselves up? You know, like where are we starting to really look at it more through that lens? I think is almost a part of this conversation, I think, as we unravel this.
Yeah, it's like, how does it land in your system So, actually, using some of our practices, some of the really beautiful embodied practices. So, when we are in that space of comparison, is the comparison something that is exciting our system? We can feel it bubbling away. Oh my God, look what's possible for women. Or is it really constricting and going into shame and judgment and all of this stuff that comes there? And that actually speaks more to where we are than to where that person is, and the work that is there to be done for us if we're looking at women. And we can feel that in our system, and it feels really uplifting versus actually it feels really shaming or damaging towards us. And I think there's something that's really powerful that occurs when we can, as women, look at other women's successes and really start to view them from the lens of what's possible versus, oh my God, I've got to get up there myself. It's so beautiful. And even in the conversations we've been having recently about who we'd love to speak to, what I've really noticed is the excitement we've all had talking about other women and what they've been doing. It's so beautiful and it's really refreshing. And I'm not going to lie, having been someone that comes from a place of self-judgment a lot, it's taken me a lot to get to that place where seeing other women's success lands in my system as bubbling, excited energy like that.
I love that, Beck, and I love that reframe that you provided in terms of, if someone's beautiful or they're successful at work or they get a promotion or something, can we change the meaning around that and from more of a collaborative approach? And so, as opposed to seeing it as a threat, as you suggested, well, is it just showing us what's possible and what's possible for all of us? And just remembering that. And look, I'm saying remembering it, I'm absolutely no expert here. I do the same things myself, but can we just remind ourselves that we can change that meaning and it doesn't have to be a threat? I came across this beautiful quote that I wanted to share, and it's from a woman called Robin Wall Kimmerer, and she's a botanist and she's big on nature. And she actually shares, her quote is, "All flourishing is mutual." And what she means in that is that in nature, nothing really thrives alone. Ecosystems flourish because everything is connected and supporting each other. And it just makes me wonder, what if that's true for women, for everybody? What if that's true for humans too? That we all are connected and we can simply just support each other.
Mm, I love that. And I always
Mm,
love the nature, I guess, examples, because it's just such a beautiful way of describing in such a simple way of like how we can actually
mm,
view this, which is like
yeah.
all of nature is equally beautiful in its different and unique ways, right? So one flower doesn't look the same as the other flower, or one tree doesn't look the same as the other tree.
Mm,
And it's in the uniqueness that we find the true qualities and the beauty of that particular part of reality or that particular part of nature. And I think like where we might go off within ourselves is that we in the like talking to our earlier inquiry, I guess, of like where does the comparison become, I guess, toxic, or where does it flip into unuseful
mm,
behaviors? We can say, or perspective, it's like I wish I was more like that. Maybe that's kind of not
mm.
so useful because it's saying, hey, I am doing my flower thing over here and I'm being, let's say a pink flower and I have these kind of leaves and they look this particular way, right? And I look at this other beautiful red rose that's sort of across from me that is blooming in a very different kind of way. And I'm like, hey, but I also want some more of that in me kind of thing. I want more of that redness also and these sparky edges that rose has that I don't really seem to have. And I think that's maybe where we lose ourselves, because we lose our authenticity and our actual
Mm,
uniqueness in that, as opposed to just really honoring the red rose in all of its beautiful qualities and expressions, and then me maybe being inspired by some of the colors and flavors and expressions and qualities that come through that. But in the same way, how can I actually be more of me, and in the flourishing of my full self? That's where the potential really sits. And so I think where I have seen myself going wrong in the past, let's say, is where I'm wanting to be more like another, as opposed to using their spark and their delight and their joy and their success as a way of inspiring the quality of that, but in my own unique way, in my own expression. I feel is a way healthier and more useful way of looking at it. And then there is that natural celebration and encouragement of all of these different parts and aspects of nature and reality and women, and also a deep honoring of my own self and my uniqueness. Because I think where we suffer is where we self-abandon. So where we suffer is where we say, this part of me is not fully welcome or not good, and it needs to be more like that, as opposed to actually being, that over there is very inspirational. And how can I invite that, maybe that quality, but in my own way, in my own self, more forward? I really love that, Mel, because that just came through. And I think that's a very healthy, beautiful, simple, yet quite profound way of looking at it, if we can truly apply it in our lives and really live that.
I wonder if there's a way here to, and I know we love doing this, but just bringing in the concept of love too. And if we link it, back to nature, we're all love, and there's enough of everything, and we're all perfect the way we are. And if someone has beautiful blue eyes and you have brown eyes, it doesn't mean they're any less beautiful. And it's like that. Also, I've heard, we hear this, the sun shines on everybody. It doesn't say you can have sun. No, you can't have sun, but you can have sun, and oh, you can have a little bit, but like it's all there. We've all got it. There's enough for everybody. And that's just it. And we don't have to compete in that. We'll all get the sunshine.
Yeah. I love this so much. It's really funny because I mentioned my daughter's really feeling the pressure of competition and a little bit of judgment at the moment. And to the point that we've just been speaking about around nature, yesterday she came home and she was really upset because I've been making her these little egg and mushroom frittatas for lunch. And one of her friends was saying, "Oh, that's disgusting," and turning around while she was eating her lunch. And she said, "Mummy, please don't make them anymore. I don't want to bring them to school." And I said, "Well, I'm not going to stop making you healthy lunches because someone doesn't like them." And then we were having a conversation about it, and she said, "Oh, she has pickles in her lunch, and I don't like pickles." And I was sort of saying, our friendships, we want to live in a rainforest. That's our dream. So we've been talking about rainforests a lot. And I said, our friendships, the people in our lives, they make up the rainforest. And we need all of the rainforest and all of the different plants to make up the rainforest. Otherwise, we've just got a tree in front of us. So we need all of that. So as much as you might not like what she eats or she might not like what you eat, that's okay. That's you being part of that rainforest as well. And I think really, yeah, relating back to nature, as you said, nature's such a teacher. It's so wise. It can really show us why things are the way they are. As I said, without the rainforest, we've just got the tree, and without our sisterhood, sometimes we're standing alone trying to do everything in the world, but there's no synergy in being alone.
Hmm. Yeah, there is I love that. Thank you so much for sharing back. And what comes up for me as we speak into these different qualities and aspects of ourselves, and kind of the examples that I gave around the rose and the pink flower and all the different kind of types of expressions we can embody. This is why I love FBR breathwork as well, because I feel what the technique allows for is more of a it allows for interoception in a deep way. And what that means is that we actually can start to feel and experience ourselves from the inside more. And I think what that allows for is more of an internal referencing system. So instead of looking more on the outside around all these other people, and it's not that that disappears, like we can still see other people and their beautiful qualities, but our internal referencing system becomes more of our guiding principle. And what I mean by that is like, actually, I want to eat this thing because I feel good about that. And it doesn't really matter so much what anyone else thinks. Yeah. And in a healthy, considerative, social way still. Yeah. So it doesn't exclude all social norms, but to a really solid degree that we really feel like internally we are our own best teachers and guides in some way, and that we really trust more of our own internal intuition, I guess you can say, but also our own viewpoints and opinions. It's like, doesn't mean it's true for everyone, but it's true for me, and that's what matters right now. And yeah, like the practice of breathing in this way allows us to claim and embody more of the different qualities within ourselves. And I've actually been exploring this more recently. Like my partner and I go to these dance things every Sunday. We go to these conscious dance events, workshops, and it's a really beautiful space to move in the body and to explore different rhythms of the body and ways of moving in the space with other people. And what I've noticed is there's so many different aspects of that, because it's this dance literally between my interoception and my exteroception. So I'm in a group with other people, so I'm out there, I'm social, but I'm also in myself. Yeah. And where I've really started to notice, where do I give too much of maybe my energy away, or where am I actually too much in my own self? And particularly of late, what I've been really starting to explore is, how can I move more sensually, but in a very healthy and contained way in this conscious dance, right? So there's no alcohol, there's no nothing. We're just dancing on music. And how can I really feel confident in that and allow myself to be seen in that, but not in a way where I'm performing, which is so different than my usual conditioning, right? And it's like, it's this very fine interplay between seeing other people move in particular ways on the dance floor and celebrating that, but and also really coming into my body and like, what's the uniqueness of this particular expression in me? And I feel breathwork does that, allows for that. And particularly with this technique where we really honor and invite the uniqueness of each individual, we honor the unique breathing patterns that are present. We honor what's there in the system. And that's the baseline where we come from. So we really don't come from a place of this needs to be different. It's actually in the full honoring of the uniqueness that's there that allows for the safety for the system to open up more fully and feel more freely, that these other different unique qualities that this human might wanting to be integrating in themselves, either through a need or want in their lives, that they can start to actually feel that more in themselves. And in the coloring outside of the lines a little bit, if you will, we start to really become more full of ourselves. And that's why I believe this practice of FBR breathwork, and then particularly, I guess we do the practice one-on-one, right? But also as we start to expand, and I hold in bar, and I hold a lot of women's circles as well. So a lot of women come together to breathe together in this way. And there's something so incredibly special that happens in the spaces, because it's a real honoring of the space of the sisterhood and at the same time of the self in that. And I think if that starts to merge beautifully, we can come back to a more full sense of that sisterhood of like, I'm myself, you are yourself. We're celebrating each other in our uniqueness and inviting more of our own selves through each other in some way. Yeah, and that's why I love breathwork as a technique and as a modality, also to actually come more fully back into this, I guess, this deeper longing that I feel in myself, and that I see in a lot of women, of coming back to our collective feminine and receive the fullness of life more through our bodies and our being, and in that be more in the collective sisterhood. Yeah, come back to that space.
Yeah, I love that you're speaking to breath work being a supportive modality in coming back to that sort of that collaboration. And I had a really beautiful healing experience, and probably experiences, because it was a repeated experience that I was having throughout breathwork sessions. And that was being in circle. And I was training at the time. And Sarah, you were one of our teachers, and being in some of the hardest sort of emotions or states that I have been in before, and allowing myself to go in them, but then feeling a female holding me through that and just allowing that to happen. Sarah, you just so happen to be that person on those occasions. But even that, even just being able to enter a space, whether it be in one of our circles or whether it be in a one-to-one session with one of us, and just have a female hold another female through something that's deeply vulnerable and painful, that has been huge for me. And I wasn't quite aware how much the female wound existed for me until I felt what it was like to be safely held by another female who was, yeah, sure in herself, confident in herself, totally regulated at the time, and there for me and me only. And yeah, that's been huge for me and my journey. And now that's what I hope to offer my clients when I'm in circles and I'm in one-to-one sessions. I'd like to bring that for every woman and man who needs that as well.
I love this idea of the feminine holding and to be allowing to receive. And I think it's something that women can give each other, but also I think men need it as well. And there's an opportunity for, we're very good women. I think we're very comfortable being the giver, the carer, helping and holding. And what that does is it allows for other women, it also allows for men to experience that. And I have some clients, some male clients at the moment, where I see how important that being held in that space by a woman is so important for them. But I want to come back to what you were saying, Mel, because I think one of the real vulnerable parts of this idea of sisterhood is that allowing ourselves to be supported. And as I said, I think generally we're really good, and especially now because the sort of masculine feminine roles have changed, or sort of the waters have become a little bit muddier just because of the ways in which we live our lives. We are generally through history the caretakers, the givers, the space holders, all of that sort of thing. But we're also the receivers,
Mm,
and I think that receiving has become more difficult over time for women because it requires us to let go in a way that we haven't necessarily done for a little while. And
hmm
it then becomes this sort of level of uncertainty, maybe fear of being seen or judged, and a level of, yeah, maybe even tenderness that's required in order to be in that space of receiving. And you sort of spoke about being in that space where Sarah was holding you. And I also know you've mentioned it on several occasions in the podcast, how you're very good in that space of doing and
hmm
yeah, what is that like for you, and how did you move into a space where you felt comfortable and safe to be in that space of receiving?
Yeah, thank you so much, Beck. I definitely have, and I have spoken to this on our other episodes, but spent a lot of time in what we would call that masculine energy. So that doing and that controlling and that always thinking. Um, so to be honest, for me to switch that part off and sit in more of a what this system, what I would call, would be a less active role. Like receiving at first felt less active. And then there was this weird idea of like, well, where am I? And what am I doing? Well, I'm not doing anything. And that's the whole point. But there was almost like a loss of needing that motion, needing that that activation to do something. So it was also becoming comfortable with the lack of what I needed to do. Like nothing needed to be done by me, but the tenderness that you speak to and the vulnerability that required a courage for sure, and a trust of just knowing that I will be okay if I open up. And look, it's still a constant journey. I'm still finding myself in areas where I'm like, oh, I'm definitely trying to control this here. I'm being the active participant in thinking I can control things, because we can't really control things, right? So at the moment now, I am able to take a step back and soften. And what's allowing me to do that is by taking a deep breath and then feeling more into my heart space. And I feel like the heart space, once that softens and lets go, then receiving becomes a lot easier. I think it's our natural way of being, and I think I've denied that feminineness or that receiving in myself for so long that it's almost a coming home to that again, or a remembering that that's actually there and it exists. So yeah, it's definitely been a process of all those steps, like a breaking down of all of that, just to be able to sit in that space alone.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. I
Thank you.
know I always get excited when I am waiting for Sarah's got to come in with some of the goods. But what I hear, I think, from you, Mel, is that recognition that being in this place of receiving, it's not a passive place to be. It's actually
Mm.
very active in itself.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And that's what I think I was scared of at first, was that receiving meant a lack of control or a lack of autonomy, and I just had to receive. And it's really not that at all. It's actually it's that word that we've been circling around here. It's actually collaborative with life, with what's in front of you. There's a beauty there, and it's almost creative.
Mm.
And I'm finding, yeah, that the softening and the creativity and engaging with life in a different way, you know what? It's not actually passive at all. It's not effortful. There's no effort, there's no forcing, but it's just a happening. And it's actually a really beautiful place.
Mm. Yeah, I love that you're sharing this, and Mel, I can very much resonate with your like some of the pieces you share in your journey and how very similar they are, and they have been for me as well, around like really working on this capacity to receive. Yeah. Yeah, just curious, Mel, what have you noticed as a difference in your life as a result of being able to receive more? Like in terms of maybe certain choices you make or certain actions in your life, or maybe ways of viewing ideal for the world, or yeah, curious what has changed for you.
I'm definitely more aware of what I want, and also quite aware that what I've wanted has quite often been there. I just haven't allowed it because I've been the one trying to stay in control and not wanting to need anybody. And yeah, also the relationship with, almost back in that industrial revolution days, like that, if you give and receive, like it just becomes quite static and it's quite transactional. I give, so you have to give me something. There was this real breaking down of that relationship now. So to be honest, now I just have a softer state about me, not only in my body, but also in my mind. My mind is softer, my thoughts are softer. And don't get me wrong, I can go back into that active place quite easily. But yeah, there's just a softness online.
Yeah, so beautiful. I can very much relate to also that softness quality coming in more forward. Actually in that it's so much more power. And yeah, my experience to kind of continue what you started, Mel, around like the whole receiving and how that feels so different in the body is actually a surrendering to the flow of life. And in that is so much more energy available, like actually so much more energy available. And in that is the vibrancy, the creativity, the sexuality, the capacity to move and act in the world from so much more of an aligned place. Because receiving for me also like is this emptying. It's like emptying of the construct of our self-identities, of our supposed, what is supposed to be or not supposed to be, and the control mechanisms and coping strategies and all of the things. And actually, the more we, you know, let that go, the more we can receive life. And in the receiving of life, the more active, actual, true participation happens, as opposed to our perception of what participation even is, you know? So I find, yeah, this softer stance allows for so much more. Like what I've noticed in myself is actually my capacity probably has like increased like 3 times more than what it was, on a way more holistic view in life as well. So work, but also on the home front, and then exercise, and then sleep, and then like walking with the doggy, and just like in creativity and dance, and like just in so much more areas of life, there has been so much more ability to be present, and therefore ability to really receive the fullness of the moment. And in that is so much more energy. So it can feel like, and I can very much relate to that feeling that you also described, Mel, of like this real, oof, like being almost on the edge of like, if I let go more here, I don't know if I'm going to be held. I don't know if this is going to be safe. But then actually in the more surrendering of that, to feel, yeah, this deeper trust in life, and this deeper holding by life. And the breath is such a powerful way of doing that, because breath is life, right? And actually allowing the inhale to just wash in more fully and deeply, and the exhale to let go more deeply, and receive the more fullness of eros, of energy. Yeah. And yeah, well, wanted to speak to your point around being held by other women, because I can also relate to that story. I feel, and still do, there's still some layers there for me to work through. It's like I feel very comfortable being held by men in a space like that. Like a man holds me, I know they've got me, I'm like, yes, I can let go here. And I feel very sort of confident in that. But then, yeah, when it comes to a woman, I notice these little patterns of like, are they really going to catch me? Or I think I know it kind of better. Or this, not like, no, I think I need to breathe like this in this moment, kind of a little bit, right? And it's like, I think that for me, in my own personal story, I think I still have a subtle bias to males somehow being more knowledgeable in certain areas than females. And um there's a sadness actually that arises within me as I speak to that, because I know for a fact that that's not true. Maybe in some cases, sure, but in so many other cases it's not, right? And so, yeah, I find these circles, and these breathwork circles are a powerful opportunity for people to see their patterns and see them arise in the moment in relationship to all these different dynamics that are in the space. So there's the other women in the space, then there's the facilitators that are in the space, and every moment of touch or contact can tell us something about ourselves. And so it's these spaces that we create, these women's circles that we create, are profound opportunities for learning and growth and development, and unlearning in that as well, and letting go, because there's so many layers that are simultaneously in the space. There's the the sharing in front of other women, maybe sometimes, difficult moments, maybe even shameful stuff. And actually in the relationship with the women is where we heal it, wherever the wound is. And it's often in relationships, and wherever we want to then heal it is in relationships. So if this is calling you as a listener, I highly recommend going to more women's spaces, going to groups, whether that's with us in a breathwork circle or in other groups. But it's a really profound space if you really watch yourself in the space of so much data and information about yourself, and a profound opportunity to learn and grow.
As you're talking about that, there's two things that come up for me. The first is just an acknowledgement of the fact that for most of us women, we've sort of grown up with all of this sort of compare and contrast that's created our relationship with other women. But then for you, Sarah, that's it's almost next level, right? Because even when you were a young teenager, you were in these spaces where even if you weren't comparing and contrasting yourself to other women, the people around you were, because you needed the job. You were competing against other women for these jobs, right? So as you're talking, I just get this sort of awareness of, wow, how big that must have been. And just, yeah, how amazing the work that you've done to break that. And just really the acknowledgement that it still comes up from time to time. And that there are moments where you feel like you are more comfortable being held by men than women as well. So, yeah, just really honoring the sort of layers to that that we all have, and then the additional layers that you would have experienced through your career as well. And also, the second thing that came up for me is just as you were talking about that, I really have found it interesting in my own life that I feel more myself often in front of men than women, which I find really interesting in some ways because it's been men that have hurt me physically in my life in a way that women haven't hurt me. And yet, the fear around judgment that I get with women really overwhelms my system in a way that I don't really feel that with men. So I've had to teach myself to be in the sisterhood and to find safety in that. And just as I'm, in the sort of late 30s, early 40s of my life, really coming into my own with the women around me and feeling safe to bring in all of those parts. FBR has been such a huge part of that because really, really the messiness of everything that I've brought into those circles, and just the real deep empathy or the kind smiles on people's faces as they're listening to that. And I'm witnessing and I'm sort of creating that safety in my system by watching the responses to that has been so beautiful. And I just really agree with what you said, Sarah, or both of you, in regards to if you can get to these women's events, the women's FBR circles, or just women's events in general, and being around women in these spaces, it's so healing.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of that, Beck. And um, yeah, the differences around being with males and with females and in what spaces we feel more comfortable. And I think there's a truth to what you're saying, that I think females, generally speaking, because we don't have maybe the physical strength, biologically speaking, we tend to rely more on gossiping and on judging ways in order to I guess make us feel safer in the world, even though it's a poor strategy, but we still use them in many ways. And yeah, thank you also for recognizing that I had this like double layer being in the modeling industry. And also I have to say with that, I've met so many beautiful, beautiful women and incredible girls, and so sweet and gentle and loving as well, that were at the top of their careers, as was I within that time. And what it has also shown me is that that is also really very much in the space. And so there was this competitive layer, and at the same time is actually in some ways actually built a lot of trust for me between women as well. So there's, I guess, like multi layers or multiple sides to that. But I wanted to speak to that because it's definitely been also in some ways, I guess, very healing in so many ways as well, where there was also in some jobs a lot of collaboration. So yeah, I guess both of the energies were very much there and present. Yeah, like wanting to speak to this receiving aspect. I think as a humanity, what I can start to kind of see in my personal practice, in the circles that I hold space in, and the sort of the larger systems and networks that I can kind of see what's happening, is what seems to be happening. And Beck, you spoke to this at the beginning of our conversation, is this crumbling of our system some way. Like there is more awareness and people are more awake to what seems to be happening worldwide. And I think what we're starting to see is that there's a real crumbling of the way we're doing things. And I think people are starting to really realize that there is more mental health issues than ever, even though there is in some ways more, I guess, quote unquote, luxury in some other ways. And there's more wars. I mean, gosh, what's going on, right? And so I think what we're really starting to see is there's a really big shift that's needed energetically, globally, to move towards a more harmonious way of operating and living in. And I mean, gosh, there's climate change and all of that is going on, right? And AI, and I mean, there's so much to go into there. But what I believe is really happening is almost a spiritual revolution where we are starting to see actually these ways of doing more, achieving more, accomplishing more, where we're actually extracting from nature to give ourselves more, what I guess, more opportunity seemingly in the short term, because we're extracting from nature. So we're not, we're depleting the very resource that we rely on to live. And yeah, what I really, really believe is required is a way more feminine stance in life. And what I mean by feminine in this case is a way more participatory, soft and spacious stance where we really start to see a lot of the resources are already within us. Maybe we don't need 3 cars in a big house, and maybe what we need is actually a way more harmonious way of living with our environment. And I think that way of looking at harmony with our environment and in our environment is way more of a feminine stance in and of itself. And where the personal accomplishments are kind of, it's just a bit old and it's a bit superficial. And I think people are starting to see that more and more. And yeah, it's going to be a very interesting upcoming 5 years. And what I see with a lot of the people that are coming into my private practice is this real deep longing for an exhale, actually, a deep exhale and an exhale into more trust with life. And so I guess I hope that this podcast, and it's for me a very big part of the reason for this podcast, is an invitation into a collective shift into that direction. Doesn't mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater, like we can keep some of the really good stuff about what we've done over the last couple of years in terms of our systems and so on. And also I think we're really starting to see some of it is just really not working and it's short term. And we need, what I've studied for many years, integral theory as well, which is a framework where we can see how our consciousness level influences our systems in the world, and our consciousness level influences the way we lead and operate and make choices in the world. Yeah, that we need an upgrade in consciousness, and it's going to happen anyway, particularly with AI. We're being forced into it, really, and it's already happening. And what I see is it's a move into more of a feminine stance, into more of an exhale, more of a spaciousness, and way less personal striving, and more of a harmonious, more collective striving is what I would call that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so beautiful, Sarah. And I love how you've brought the conversation back. Just, I don't know, if it just things feel softer now as we're speaking to this, and to stay in that harmony and that softness. I wonder if it's just worth mentioning here that now that we've explored, all of this, the sisterhood and the conditioning and where we are and why we may react the way we do, can we have compassion for ourselves in that too, right? We we aren't inherently competitive or trying to bring each other down. We just have all these reasons why we may feel that way or why this state comes up. So having compassion for ourselves, and then hopefully getting to the point where we can then have compassion for others. So if we see this playing out for another female, we can see her being competitive with you or fighting with you over something. There can be some compassion around that as well. And that might be a way to shift the state of the sisterhood, or to remember, or to come back to that beautiful connection that we do innately have as females.
Yeah, love that, Mel. And as you're describing that, I think that compassion and you'll have to excuse me, I have a bit of a cold. That compassion that you're describing has been so important in my life in those real allowing and letting go of the stuff I've been holding on in some of those examples that I shared about the instances of bullying, for example, where I can see now with clearer eyes, I have this level of compassion as to why people felt like they needed to compete in those moments. And so to stay in the softness, and as we sort of draw this episode to a close, as you know, I love a good journal inquiry. Maybe some questions that our listeners might ask themselves might be around, are there moments or have there been moments in your life where your relationships with women have been centered around comparison or competition? And if they have, maybe what's been sitting underneath that? What do you know in your system? What can you recognize that's been sitting underneath that? And you might notice fear or guilt or shame, or I don't want to name them. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but you might be able to explore what's actually sitting underneath it for you. And then maybe once you've identified what's sitting underneath it for you, if you were to start looking at other women's success as expansion, the way we've spoken about earlier, the way we get excited about seeing what's possible from other people's success, what would change? What would that feel like in your system? How would that change things for you? And I know I'm asking lots of questions now, but just sort of having some inquiry around the sisterhood, because as we spent a lot of time thinking about what this podcast would be, and where we describe this as truly a love letter or love letters to our sisters, it's really about how do we raise each other up. And that's been such an important part of why we created We Are Woman. And so my last invitation is, if the success of other women does feel like expansion and an opportunity for us to see what's possible, share that. Feel free to share it. Share it on social media, tag us so we can see all of these really beautiful ways in which we're really growing our sisterhood, sharing the successes of each other so that we can really step into what's possible for all of us.
Thank you, Beck. Yeah, that was awesome.
We think one of the most beautiful things about this conversation is remembering that another woman's light doesn't take anything away from our own. If anything, it reminds us of what's possible. And maybe sisterhood isn't about being perfect with each other all the time. Maybe it's just about choosing support over comparison a little more often, celebrating and encouraging each other, and letting ourselves receive from each other. Because when women start lifting each other up, instead of feeling like they have to compete, something really powerful happens. So that's all from us today. Thank you so much for tuning in to We Are Woman. I hope today's conversation gave you something to reflect on, to feel into, or to carry with you into the rest of your week. Please make sure to click subscribe on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss the latest episodes as they drop. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a woman that would find it helpful, because this isn't just our podcast, it's all of ours, together. You can also follow us on Instagram at We Are Woman Podcast to stay connected, share your thoughts, and join our growing sisterhood. We've got some very special events planned and would love for you to be a part of them. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being exactly who you are.